Increase the design and 80
This
degrees
conference
Celsius
will
as
now
a
be recorded.
yeah, and as our cell temperature goes beyond 80 degrees Celsius, what happens is that there is an electrolyte inside this lithium ion cell. The electrolyte starts to disintegrate beyond 80 degrees Celsius. So electrolyte is mostly dimethyl carbonate, diethyl carbonate with an LiPF6 salt. So when once these gases are formed because of the disintegration, they tend to cause extra stress on the electrodes, and these are all in micrometers. So all these things may result into a puncture of the separator plate. The separator is the most critical part in this entire lithium ion cell, because once the separator gets damaged, it gets melted or it gets punctured, the cell is an internal short. That means its positive and negative electrodes are internally connected, and then the damage is irreversible, and there is that's the stage when we say that it's in thermal runaway. And so our prime motive is that to avoid this thermal runaway. And thermal runaway doesn't happen at a particular temperature, say like 120 degrees Celsius or 130 degrees Celsius. Thermal runaway is much of a process. It starts from 70 degrees Celsius, 80 degrees Celsius, and it can be avoided if we are having a proper battery management system and thermal management system. So what are the inputs that we should be getting from the cell so that we prior detect the thermal runaway, and we notify the passengers to get out of the car, or to make the battery an open circuit, and all other things. So for that reason, first impact important factor is the safety of the battery pack. Thermal management system, to summarize, is ensures that our lithium ion battery pack is safe. The second important thing to have a thermal management system is it increases cycle life. So today, if you buy a Tesla Model 3, it guarantees you have 2 lakh kilometers of range. So what happens is that this range, first of all, cycle life here, I mean, one cycle is when I discharge a battery pack to the low level, and then again charge it to the high level in the sense high voltage, cutoff voltage. So one complete discharge and one complete charge cycle constitutes one cycle life. So just to make it relatable to us, most of the companies, they don't tell the cycle life. They convert the cycle life in terms of a relatable parameter like number of years or number of kilometers through which our vehicle can drive. So for example, Tesla Model 3 makes us like it's usable for say 8 years of warranty life and 2 lakh kilometers. So this translates into a certain number of cycle life. And the important thing is that this cycle life is with conditions, certain conditions. One of the most important conditions is the temperature in which I'm going to operate the cell. So for example, if Tesla is providing me 8 years of battery life warranty and 2 lakh kilometers of range, drive total this drive, then this, if I take that model and if I drive it in say at extremely cold climates like 2 degrees Celsius, 3 degrees Celsius, or in sub-zero temperatures, you can see that the cycle life drastically decreases. So it's obvious that Tesla has this thermal management system, so we can well afford drive a vehicle in sub-zero degrees regions. But consider if a vehicle does not have that kind of thermal management system, we may not able to operate the vehicle when our temperature drops at below 10 degrees Celsius, or it mostly it increases above 50 degrees Celsius. So this diagram is very evident, a diagram that shows that whichever thermal management system we choose, and how control strategies we develop, we should be ensuring that our operating range should be between 25 to 35 degrees Celsius, irrespective where we are driving, what is the surrounding temperature, and what is the load profile that our vehicle is undergoing. So it so just to summarize this point, cycle life gets enhanced. We are able to have more cycle life, more number of kilometers, more lifespan of the battery if we are using a thermal management of system. Another two reasons for using the thermal management system uh, is the performance characteristics. So the thing is performance characteristics, I mean that how our acceleration is, how our pickup is, how is the drivability and traction of the vehicle. So for example, if I take the same Tesla model or any electric car, if it does not have a thermal management of system, I, and if I take it to a sub-zero degree Celsius, where the temperature is sub-zero, what happens is I won't be getting that level of acceleration that I need. I won't be getting the torque, neither I would be getting the pickup, because our battery output depends upon how what's the temperature it is. It is shown in this graph, as you can see. So with respect to the performance, the battery delivery also, we need to keep the temperature between 25 to 40 degrees Celsius for getting the maximum performance of that vehicle. The another reason is the internal resistance of the cell. So uh, every lithium ion cell has internal resistance depending upon its electrochemistry. So as we can see, our objective of internal resistance is that internal resistance is that component that is responsible for heat generation, like it is one of the factor. So we should have this thing as minimum as possible, internal resistance. So we can see as we go along the high temperature, our internal resistance is getting more and more. As we can see, at 55 degrees Celsius it's 1.3, and at 30 it is somewhere near 1. That means it's a 30% increase because of the 25 degrees Celsius rise. And in this graph it's not shown, I will be showing in the next graphs that the internal resistance also increases with decrease in temperature. For example, at 2 degrees Celsius or sub-zero degrees Celsius, the internal resistance value will also be more. So in order to keeping in mind of this performance characteristics and internal resistance, to keep them performance as high and internal resistance controlled, we need a thermal management system for a battery pack. Next slide. Yeah. So this is you can see this graphs. So it's wrong to say that Nissan Leaf is an electric vehicle, and it's mostly widely criticized for having not a proper thermal management system. So it's not that we can't say like Nissan Leaf does not have a thermal management system. It has a thermal management of system, and they are using a passive air cooling strategy. But the problem with passive air cooling strategy is that it is very inefficient in terms of the conduction rate, in terms of efficiency. But it has its pros, like it has a very low costs that we will be discussing in further slides. But just to this pyramid here is the one that is very important, that answers our why. Like why battery management, thermal management is important, because of it guarantees me safety, it enhances my car's cycle life, it enhances my performance, and it keeps the internal resistance as low as possible. And uh, as you can see, this is the last article that here, like Leaf is a rock solid pleasant electric vehicle, but the range has dropped significantly. So this is because the its degradation, the cycle life has decreasing very fast because of improper thermal management system. And another reason to have a thermal management system is that I didn't discuss above, is a fast charging. So fast charging is where we for example, for example, Tesla has fast chargers at 175 kilowatt. So with that fast charging, we are uh, putting in high amount of current into the battery pack, and that results into a high amount of temperature and high heat generation values. So if we want to have a thermal management, if we want to make our car compatible with a fast charging infrastructure, we need to ensure that we are controlling its temperature during the fast charging environment. Yeah, so this was all about the cars, because most of the time when we think of thermal management system, we always think about cars, like how they are doing the liquid cooling or air cooling. So this, for us, most of us are getting are related to two-wheelers. So this is just a slide that highlights a two-wheeler. You can see the upper red is mostly a Yo bike category. It's a Tunwal electric bike. So all these electric bikes is around 60 to 65,000, and the below one is an Ather, which is a premium segment that comes around 2 lakh rupees, 1.5 lakh rupees. So we can see the battery pack of these individual bikes on the right side. As we can see, a low powered bike, This is just a plastic casing in which you have arranged the battery packs. Since the maximum power that this two-wheeler is going to give is less than 2 kilowatt, and the market is very cost competitive, there is absolutely no need, or we don't need to bother that much about a thermal management system for this kind of two-wheeler, the lower market segment two-wheeler, because the power will be less, the heat generation will be less, and even if we want to prevent that heat generation, if we have to introduce thermal management, it won't be cost justified. At the second, at the below level, you can see the Ather 450. So Ather 450 delivers up to 6 kilowatt of maximum power. That much amount of current needs a thermal management system to get dissipate. So obviously we can't have a liquid cooling or any compressor cooling in the two-wheeler segment. So what Ather does is it makes its battery pack design in such a way that whenever it is moving, when the maximum power requirement is high, the heat fin structure is mounted in the footrest, so that what all heat is getting generated is uh, radiated out to the atmosphere. So thus we can see like it, thermal management system depends mainly on the category of the vehicle. For a low category of vehicle like two-wheeler, we can ignore it. But same two-wheeler category, if we need high power, we need to have certain provisions for taking the heat out. Similarly, I will discuss it for four-wheeler category. So the above one you can see is an E-Verito, Mahindra E-Verito, and below one is the liquid cooled Tesla Model 3. So you can see again the same thing about the maximum power. So maximum power in E-Verito is 30 kilowatts, while in Tesla it's more than 10 times of the that in E-Verito. The primary reason, because these two vehicles cater to different market segments, the power requirement and the power usability is different, and that's why this plays an important role in whether which thermal strategy we are going to choose. So this is just to get an intuitive idea as to how our vehicle category, how our maximum power and how our battery pack is influential in deciding which thermal management system to use. So I have summarized all these points in this very important slide, because this slide gives us the mapping in a, so how, what are the factors that will be responsible for thermal management design. So as we discussed, vehicle category, like E-Verito is of a different vehicle category, Model 3 is of a different vehicle category, and this vehicle category is under the control of the OEM that it is making. But there are certain factors that we don't have a control on, like with the perspective of an OEM. For example, load profile and geographic location. I can take an E-Verito and I can drive it throughout its life in a continuously very hilly and steep regions. So that will demand that will be going to affect my thermal boundary conditions, because the current requirement will be high in those hilly regions. Also, if I'm continuously, yeah. Also, if I'm continuously driving on a highway, the load requirement will be different. The heat generation will be different. The thermal strategies in that application will be different. So load profile and geographic location, we don't have that much control over, because a user can take the car anywhere, and we need to have the thermal management system such that it takes care of all the available environmental conditions. The another important bracket that comes here for thermal management design is the cell type and cell chemistry. Cell type is extremely important for thermal management, because our mostly the heat exchangers will be designed based on the cell. For example, a cylindrical 18650 cell will have a different type of heat exchanger, a serpentine coil that we will be discussing in the following slide. A pouch cell or a prismatic cell will have a different version. Just I'll just slide to the next slide to this thing. Yeah, just to give an idea of the different cell types. So this is the pouch cell, this is also a pouch cell, cylindrical cell, and this one is the prismatic cell. So this one is used in Chevy Bolt, the 54AH cell. So we can see, and all these cells may or may not have a different electrochemistry, their internal resistance will be different, the heat generation will be different. As we can see, like the prismatic cell is at least uh, 20 or 15 to 20 times more energy dense than the cylindrical cells. So heat generation in that case will be different. So we need to first select, okay, this is our cell. This is, we need to understand the cell behavior before designing any type of thermal management system. So along with that, electrochemistry. So cell chemistry also, as an OEM, we don't have that much control over what kind of electrolyte they are using, what kind of binders or additives that they are using in the cell. But mostly they consider LFP chemistry, LFP as a cathode material, as a very stable chemistry with respect to temperature, and the NCA chemistry that Tesla uses is considered very unstable. Not very unstable, but it's unstable as compared to the LFP chemistry. This is due to the different nature of the cathode material, the additives, binders, and all the electrolyte. So these are the important thing. And the other thing from an OEM perspective is the volumetric and weight constraint. So if I have to design a thermal management system, I have to ensure that whatever I'm making, whatever system I'm making, has to be in certain volumetric constraint, because the space constraints in an automobile is very it's very tight. We need to make all the thermal management system within those volumetric constraints that are available in the automobile. Plus, we should be compromising more on weight. Our thermal system should be as light as possible, because these like thermal management system is a parasite. It's a useful parasite, but it is going to take your volume, weight, and it is also going to take your power from the battery. So we need to have a highly optimized version if we want to incorporate it in our battery pack. And the last point is the cost competitiveness. So with regards to all those factors that we have discussed, what all development, operational cost, and maintenance cost should able to justify the additional benefits that we will be getting from this thermal management system. So with this slide, like, we can get to know what are the factors that we will be keeping in mind to design a thermal management system for a battery pack. So this, I think all of you already know, like, this is the process that normally follow. Cell level, we make the modules, and then we make the module into a battery pack assembly. So this is the thing. Yeah, this is the Chevy Bolt battery pack, and these are just the different types of cells to give a visual representation. The Yeah, and this is the battery pack specification. So if you want to analyze how a thermal like, we first need to know about what are the specifications of the battery pack before making any thermal calculations. So for example, this is a picture from a Chevy Bolt battery pack photo. It's an actual spec of that vehicle. So they have told it's a 350 volt battery pack, and they have told what is the total energy, that is 57.4 kilowatt hour. So they have not specified age of the battery pack, battery capacity. So what we do is just the basic calculations. We get the age of the battery pack. So we can say a Chevy Volt battery pack is 163 Ah and 350 volt, amounting to 57.4 kilowatt hour of energy. So before making any calculations, we need to be thoroughly clear about the C rate. So we can see, if we are charging or discharging the Chevy Bolt with 326 amps, we say like we are discharging or charging it at 2 C rate. 1 C rate corresponds to 163 amps, whatever your capacity is. If you are withdrawing or inputting 81.5 ampere, that means you are charging or discharging at zero point 0.5 C rate. So your heat generation that is there is a very greatly dependent upon the C rate. For example, if our nominal operation is at 1 C rate in an automobile, as compared to 2C rate, the heat generation is 4 times in 2C as compared to 1C, because it is dependent upon the square of the current. So in 2C, when I am discharging the battery pack, the heat generated will be 4 times as compared to the heat that will be generated in 1C rate. So knowing about at what will be the average C rate when the vehicle will be in operation, what will be the maximum C rate when the vehicle will be in operation, knowing those values is very critical in as an input for the thermal management of system. And practically, whenever an automobile or auto car drives on the road, there is never a fixed C rate. The C rate changes at every second as per the load profile. So after this, there is the heat generation. This is our main calculation, like main understanding. Like, heat generation inside the battery pack. Why and how is the heat generated getting inside the battery pack, and what it depends upon? So as we from the earlier side we discussed the C rate. So C rate, knowing a appropriate C rate of our battery pack while operation is one of the factor. Second is the cell temperature. Cell temperature again, for example, the behavior of the cell, if we are discharging it at 1 C rate, if the initial temperature is 40 degrees Celsius, will be different if we are discharging it at the same 1 C rate, if but the cell temperature is at 20 degrees Celsius. In both the case, the cell behavior, the heat generation will be different. So the heat generation also depends upon the cell rate. It depends upon the surrounding temperature also, because at hot climate, when the climate will be hot, it will be again an additional load. It will be aiding the reactions, the electrochemical reactions. So the heat generation will be more if our outside temperature is more. Another factor is the state of charge that we normally refer to as SOC. So we can see in the picture it is shown as 97%. It's a display SOC. So this is the state of charge. When a battery will be fully charged, it will be 100%, and when we will be using it, it will be decreasing from 100, 80, 20, 70, and all those. At 0% we stop the charging, sorry, stop the discharging, like the battery pack is fully drained. So our heat generation is also a function of the state of charge. For example, when a battery pack SOC is 100%, when my battery is 100% and I'm driving the car, my heat generation will be different when I, as compared to that when I will be driving it at 50% SOC or 20% SOC. So heat generation is also a function of the state of charge and the internal resistance also. Internal resistance, like I square R, the heat generation, the R component here we will be discussing it in greater length ahead. Then the number of cycles used. So another factor is that uh, the heat generation is also a function of at I already talked earlier, like my vehicle gives me 1,000 cycle life. The heat generation when at 500 cycle life will be different as compared to a second cycle life or the first cycle life when the vehicle will be new. So as a general rule, when we are using the electric vehicle along with the time, for example, if I buy the car today and if I drive it, the heat generation at if we keep all other factors constant, will be different if I will be driving it after 3 years. So internal resistance and number of cycles used is important, that they will be responsible for impacting my thermal heat generation rate. And the second is also cell electrochemistry and whether we are charging the battery pack or discharging the battery pack, heat generation will be different. Say for example, if you discharge the battery pack at 1 C rate at all these parameters are constant, and if you discharge the battery pack at 1 C rate, the total heat generations will be different in both the cases. So as we see, there are nearly 8 to 10 parameters on which this heat generation depends upon, and all these parameters are a dynamic condition. They change every second, they change every day. So in order to have a firm control over thermal design, what we do is initially we consider some parameters constant. For example, I'll consider a cell temperature and all other part constant, and I'll just vary the C rate. Then I will change the, for example, I'll take a uniform temperature, like say 25 degrees Celsius. What is the heat generation at 1C, 2C, 3C? So we keep some most of the components constant, we vary one, and then we judge how the heat generation is getting inside the battery pack, is generated inside the battery pack. So yes, this is the approach that we mainly follow for making any calculations. Uh, so right now, what stage we are in is, we in this PPT is we need to determine how much is the heat load. So once we get what is the thermal load on the battery pack, we will able to make the sizing of our compressor, controller, or heat exchanger or chiller accordingly. The first step is to get the value of the thermal heat load, and I have purposefully I have purposely put thermal load because it can be a cooling load also and can be a heating load also. So the calculations for thermal load involves two approaches. One is a simulation based approach. So for simulation based approach, there are software like COMSOL, Battery Design Studio, where you can where the electrochemical profiling is already done in the software backend, where and you get to know about the heat generation inside these kind of uh, softwares. The other is an experimental based approach. So and most of the times there is no significant difference between these two approaches. Only part is experimentally based approach. Yeah, experimentally based approach takes too much time in order to arrive at a certain condition as compared to the simulation based approach. So once we know about a thermal load, what we do is we need to start working parallelly on the component sizing. So there are another sets of softwares. All of you have must have used ANSYS, CFD, Star CCM, and Coolpack is another specific refrigerant related software to get an idea of the component sizing. Now I know from the first step, from this calculation stage, like this is my heat load. Say for example, 2000 watt is my heat load of the battery. So I will be designing the components. Likewise, I will be designing the control strategies likewise, and the process optimization. So process optimization in the sense is a part of the control strategy. For example, uh, at what time the compressor should turn on, at at when the temperature of say 50 degrees Celsius is reached, I should turn the compressor on. If it once it again, if it, and I have to bring the temperature at 30 degrees Celsius. Once again, if the 30 degrees Celsius is reached, I have to turn off the compressor. So this is just an example of a control strategy. This control strategy can be very complex and interrelated. For example, once while I'm driving a car, say my battery is getting like my battery is depleted too much, like I'm at 10% SOC, my battery is going to as is at the end of the state of charge. So at that time, what my purpose as a user is that I just have to reach my destination, even though my battery life is my battery remaining is very less. So at that time, my control strategy should ensure like my cooling system is not getting on, because I don't want to waste that power on cooling system, because I need that power for driving my vehicle. So there are plenty of control. There are like approaches. There are plenty of if else statements that helps us to have a control strategy that will be useful when the vehicle will be running. So another parallelly, there will be the fabrication, prototyping, testing, optimization, and what all physical level testing and pilot run we do. What we do is we always give it a feedback to the simulations team, so that the for example, just to get a clarity on this, for example, the condenser part, right? So condenser part, uh, first we get the condenser sizing through the simulations, then we do a physical testing of the part, then we come to know, okay, the condenser is not working up to their optimal stat, is not the phase change is not happening inside the condenser. Phase change means from gas to liquid, it's not happening in the condenser. What to do? So at that stage we decide, okay, we have to increase the fan RPM that is responsible for cooling the condenser, or if that's not possible, we have to increase the condenser area to have that phase change completely. So all those to and fro feedbacks happen between the simulations and the physical testing, and once all those things get stabilized and we are getting the output that we desired, we roll the car to the mass manufacturing phase, the thermal management system for the mass manufacturing phase. And this is just one of the there are plenty of uh, things that we don't have control that needs to be included in this control strategy that I have mentioned here. For example, if you are in a very cold weather and you didn't lock your car door and you went out, uh, so the car, so that the thermal management system should ensure the other system ECU that the door is still unlocked, the cold air is getting in, the temperature is getting decreased. So the ECU through a cloud platform should notify the users about this kind of shortcomings. So all this thermal management system, the battery management system, and the vehicle management system should work in synchronization in order to achieve a single purpose of our objective is to maintain the cell temperature between 20 to 40 degrees Celsius or 25 to 35 degrees Celsius. So this for this just a single objective statement, all vehicles or all subsystems are working in synchronization. So this is the flow chart that we follow while making any thermal management system design. So coming back to the thermal generation formula. So this I'm talking about the experimental method. What all heat that is getting generated right now, it is part of it is a joule heat and part of it is an entropic heat. Joule heat, most of us have already worked on joule heat. Joule heat is basically when I say a copper wire, and if I say like we know the resistance by rho L by A formula, and we know how much current it is passing. So I'll just do I square R, I'll get the joule heat of that copper wire. But unlike cells, what we have is the joule heating is there plus an entropic factor is there because it's an electrochemical cell. So the heat generation is a function of a joule heating plus the entropic heat generation. Entropic heat generation means what is happening is when the cell is charging or discharging is the there is intercalation and deintercalation of the lithium ions. So once the lithium ions gets placed in the intercalated side, it's an exothermic reaction. It generates heat. So the cause of the generation of the heat is a electrochemistry, and this entropic heat generation is also reversible. For example, when I discharge a battery pack, entropic heat is positive. When I discharge the battery pack, it is negative. That means there is a slight decrease in temperature. There may be a slight decrease in temperature while charging the battery pack because of if the entropic heat is more than the joule heat. Most of the cases this is not the case because joule heat is always more than the entropic heat. So this is the formula. I think this OCV is the open circuit voltage, VT is the terminal voltage, I is the current, and current value we consider constant. Uh, for example, if I make an automobile, I know like this kind of automobile, most of the time it will be discharging it at say zero point 0.6 C rate. So what all current is there corresponding to the zero point 0.6 C rate, I will be using that current to get the overall factors to calculate the overall parameters. So so our objective right now is to get the value of Ri in, that is the internal resistance of the cell. And you can see like this is a plain and simple Ohm's formula, V by I. So how we get Ri in is first, like this slide just tells about what actually is an Ri in, like the internal resistance of the cell. So the red dots that you are seeing, that those are the lithium ions. So lithium ions, while discharging, they are going to migrate from the graphite anode to the cathode. And see, for example, if I take the red particle, the lithium ion, it has to travel through the electrolyte. It has to travel through the separator. Separator is a porous structure, and then through another through the same electrolyte, it has to go into the cathode particle. So in this passage, there will be many of the resistances. Each of these component will have their individual resistances. So the summation of all for example, you can see this binder material is there that binds the anode to the current collector. When the electron is flowing, wants to go to the current collector, if these two three spherical circles are missing, for example the binding material is not that good, then the internal resistance will further increase. So based on the electrochemistry, this each we get that is the basis for determining the internal resistance of the cell. And this is a circuit diagram that I think this circuit diagram is a once RC branch circuit diagram that replicates the electrochemistry of a cell through a electronics circuit. And just to make clear, the ohmic heat generation, the joule heating, or it is called as the irreversible heating, and this entropic heat is also called as reversible heat because it can be depending upon whether we are charging it or discharging it. So once we got what exactly is the internal resistance of the cell, the second question is how to calculate it. If you give me one cell, for example, 18650 cell or a pencil cell you give, how will I calculate the internal resistance of that cell? So for that, there are two approaches. So again, internal resistance are divided into two types: DC-IR, direct current internal resistance, and AC impedance, uh, AC alternating current internal resistance. So first we'll, as I discussed about the equivalent circuit, this is the equivalent circuit. So in order to get the DC value, I need to know the RS value, I want to know the RP value, and know the summation of that value that will give me the DC resistance. So how to do this, calculate this in lab, is that you take a cell, you discharge, you first rest it for 20 minutes to get it to certain electrochemical equilibrium. You start discharging the cell at 1C rate for say 15 minutes. At the end of 15 minutes, you stop discharging the cell. So this graph shows the current. So here I stopped taking the current out of the cell. So once you stop the current, the voltage will increase and then it will saturate to a value. So that value is a UT value. Where you stopped it is a sorry, this is a misprint. This is a UOCV value. This is the UT value. The upper value is UOCV value, lower value is UT value, and the current is, you already know, because you are the one who are discharging the cell at a constant load. So based on that, you know the UOCV, you know the UT, and you know the I. So as per the formula I discussed earlier, UOC minus UT upon I will give me a value of the DC resistance. But the important thing to remember here is this DC resistance corresponds to a certain SOC. For example, while I'm doing this kind of experiment, my SOC is 80%. Then I will again do this wait for here, and then again I will repeat the same procedure at 75% SOC, at 70% SOC. So across all state of charge, I will perform this experiment, and then I will get the variation of internal resistance. I will get the variation and the value of the internal resistance with respect to the OC, with respect to the state of charge. Normally, at the end of the discharge, when my battery is about to get completely discharged, the value of internal resistance is high, and between of all other ranges, it is mostly low. So this is the, but the major limitation in DCIR approach is this single experiment, this single reading takes about 10 hours. So if you want to do it at say 5 interval SOC, so this experiment was done at 80% SOC, then we'll do at 75%, 70. So it will take at least 2 to 3 days to get a complete mapping of the DC resistance with respect to the SOC. The other option to use is the AC uh, impedance meter. So impedance meter just comes with two probes. You have to connect two probes at the two terminals of the cell, and this is a high frequency pulse that you have to give, and you get the value displayed on the screen. What is the, it takes hardly 15 to 20 seconds. The ACIR high frequency is mostly used in industry for cell shorting, but it's very important to know that this value is just the RS value. It is not RS plus RP value. Most of the cell manufacturers, or whenever someone, if you contact any cell manufacturers or a vendor, they tell the value of a cell resistance as said 20 or 2 milliohm or 3 milliohm or any value. So that value is an AC impedance value, that is just an RS value. For thermal management, what we need is RS plus RP, because it's the resistors that are responsible for the heat. So another approach here is a low frequency hertz pulse current that we have to give. So it's like obvious, like if my input AC volt, what I do here is I give it an input AC pulse of 1 hertz. So at very low frequency, the capacitance is very high, so current will flow in this direction. At very high frequency, capacitance is low, capacitive resistance is low, so current takes this direction. So for I'll get this value RS plus RP if I have a low frequency hertz. So this can be done by impedance spectroscopy. It will take maximum 20 seconds to get a reading at a particular SOC. So within 4 to 5 hours, you can map all the internal resistance of the cell with respect to changing SOC. And just to demonstrate like this huge time consuming experiment of DC and the low frequency is gives same result, this is the graph. And we can see like if it's 100 millivolt by DC meter, around same 100 millivolt milliohm is possible at measure from that ACIR impedance spectroscopy, EIS impedance spectroscopy. So another thing to say here is that resistance of a cell is not a single value. For example, I cannot say like this cell has a 25 milliohm resistance. It's an incomplete statement for me to make. What the complete statement I have to make is that internal resistance of the cell is 24 or 25 milliohm at a certain SOC. So because if you take the same cell and if you move the SOC to higher SOC, if it's fully charged, then the same DCIR, the internal resistance value is going to change, and it is also going to change based on the temperature. So this is what I'm trying to say. Like, see, just multiply the x-axis by 100. So this is 100% charge battery. This is 0% charge battery. This is 40% charge battery. We can see the discharging the resistance. The internal resistance varies from 27 to 10 milliohms through while discharging the battery. So it's more than 200 to 300 times the variation is there. So it's very important to have all these lookup tables with you ready, so that whenever at whatever SOC you are, you can get the corresponding resistance value at that particular SOC. And this is just different temperatures also have a different kind of factor. So just to reiterate our earlier process, at 45 degrees Celsius, like at 25 degrees Celsius is the where we intend to design the entire thermal management system. So it, and another, the below diagram showcases that the nature of the resistance also changes whether we are charging it or discharging it. While charging, you can see the nature of the curve is different. This is a bucket curve, while this is an ever decreasing curve with respect to the SOC. So what all experiments that we do, we always map internal resistance value with respect to that particular SOC. So with this slide, we are finished with this calculation, this one that is mentioned in the box. Because right now what we know is, we know the I, we know this kind, we know we have calculated R in at each SOC. So if you say what is the what is the heat generation at say 40% SOC, what I'll do is I'll go back to the lookup table. I'll see what is the internal resistance corresponding to that 40% SOC and 25 degrees Celsius, and then I'll put this is basically I square R. So you just substitute this, so you get this value plus what plus the entropic heat. So now this factor is remaining. So how to calculate this factor? This is a very lengthy procedure of calculating potentiometric heat. So this is that procedure. So what we do is we take a cell, we reach a certain SOC. Say for example, I take the cell to 80% SOC, and then I slightly start varying my temperature, the temperature of the cell, and I measure the voltage. So that is what it means, like dV by dt. With slight increase in temperature, I measure the voltage. This is current, this is temperature in absolute, in Kelvin terms. And we do it at different SOCs, and then plot a graph of IT versus SOC. So once this is done, we get this table. So right, as per our earlier example, if you tell me what is the heat generation at say a 40% or say 50% SOC and at 25 degrees Celsius, what I'll do is this square part, I need to get the RIN value. I'll go to the lookup table. I'll see the SOC value corresponding to the input. I'll get this square, and then I with the this kind of this plots that are shown, I will get the lower version. So this is just to get an, and this is the like the final results that we get. So this is the total heat generation and total total heat, and what fraction of the total heat is joule heat and reaction heat. So this is very laborious task, and we don't, if you want to skip all this and you just need to know what is the heat generation, you switch to this method. This is the most fluid and most accurate method, calorimetric method. In this method, it's everyone knows how a calorimeter works. So we just discharge it at different C rates, and we get what is the thing, what is the heat generation. So this is widely used. And so now we will come about the battery pack. So from the calorimetric method or with the experimental way, we got the heat generated by one cell. Now just multiply it how much cells you have, that is the total heat generated. Apart from that, there will be a convective heat flux, outflux, depending on what your ambient temperature is. And conduction is going to be there for chassis members. If the chassis members is where your battery pack is going to be kept, chassis is very hot, there will be a conductive influx from that chassis, that also needs to be taken. Plus there will be power electronic devices in the battery management systems that needs to be, will generate heat, and heat generated by bus bar. The bottom two are not that much responsible for generating heat, but top three are major contributors for this kind of application. So just to show it in the pictorial format, this is the heat generation, convective heat flux, conductive heat flux, and all the cumulative value I have to take it out of that battery. So I will just rush through this basic thermal management systems. So right now, up till now here, what we can conclude is that we got to know how to arrive at a particular value. Say, as per up till this slide, I got to know, okay, my thermal management system requires a load of say 2000 watts, and maximum heat load can come up to 4500 watts. So I know the to get values of how to design my components now, because I know the values of the thermal loads now. So depending on that, there are this is the cabin air cooling system. eVerito, Nissan Leaf use this kind of cabin air cooling system. It is highly inefficient system, but if your heat generation is not that high, and if your cost is important in this regard, you use a cabin air cooling. Radiator cooling is the same that we have in an IC engine right now for engine cooling. So this is coupled with other systems. So apart from that, this is the two most widely used thermal management systems right now: direct refrigerant two-phase cooling and secondary loop. So refrigerant cooling, direct, I think a BMW i3 uses this kind of cooling, and all the Tesla, Chevy, Bolt use the secondary loop cooling. What happens in direct loop cooling is it's basically a same air conditioner for a cabin cooling. And this is the cold plate. In the cold plate, I am passing a refrigerant here in case of a direct cooling. While in this case, what I'm doing, I'm using that refrigerant to cool another water-based ethylene glycol mixture, and I'm passing a ethylene water glycol mixture in this kind of method. Advantages of this direct cooling is that direct cooling helps to me to avoid most of the heat exchangers. It makes my system very simplified. But the disadvantage associated here is that uh, I can't use it if I want to heat the battery, for example, in cold regions. So for that, I have to have a separate heater arrangement, because VCRS system is very inefficient if I want to use it as a heat pump. While in secondary loop system, I just have to heat the water glycol mixture through a heater and pass it into the plate, cold plate. So these are the significant differences between those two type of system. Another one is the PCM system. So phase change cooling has a very specific application. For example, if a food truck is there, so you want to combine your food truck, the storage into a battery. So in those kind of very specific application, phase change is used. So, and Peltier is highly inefficient system, uh, but it's very useful in a miniature cooling. For example, micro, if your MOSFETs are getting heated up, then Peltier is an option there, heat sink is an option there. So these are miniature cooling to be used in automobile applications. So what we discussed here is the thermal management of an electric vehicle. For battery pack, now we know, like, to get the heat generation rate, to get convective heat flux. But the thermal management of a electric vehicle, a battery pack thermal management is just a part of it. There is no isolated battery pack thermal management system in any of the OEMs. What they have done is they have clubbed the existing HVAC cooling, the cabin cooling, The power inverters need to be cool. DC-DC converters need to be cool. The drivetrain, the electric motors need to be cool. For fast charging, the onboard charger needs to be cool. Even for slow charging, 15 kilowatt charging, the onboard charger needs to be cool. So except for the first cooling load, where there can be heating and liquid cooling requirement, heating and liquid requirement for cabin cooling, all others needs a cooling requirement. So now when we design a thermal management system for a battery, for a vehicle, for a battery pack, we need to consider every aspect of the components involved in this design. So this is the Chevy Volt battery pack, the same slide that we discussed. So from that slide, we already the addition is this kind of 140. See, in the slide they have mentioned the peak power is 160 kilowatt. So from that, what we get is at maximum 146 amps. I'm able to draw the my battery is going to give from a single cell. So these are just the basic calculations. So I'll just this helps me to conclude that maximum discharge rate in my Chevy Bolt will be 2.7 C rate. So whatever thermal system that I will be designing should accommodate that design point, because that's the maximum design point. So this is the schematic. I think we'll spend some few time in this schematic because this is the most important part. First one slide. What I have done here. I have done here is first we'll discuss about the hot surrounding temperature, because it's more related to the Indian environment. So in this system, you can see there are three independent cooling systems. First is this system, the chiller system that will be useful in cold environment. This is a battery heating system and battery cooling system and cabin cooling system, and this is the controller and other accessory cooling system. So let's say right now we are in a place like Chennai where the temperature is 40-45 degrees Celsius. We need our cabin to be cool at 25 degrees Celsius. We also need our battery to be cool at 25 degrees Celsius. So green arrow signifies cold, red signifies hot. So I'll let the cold water ethylene glycol through this plate. It will become hot by taking battery heat. It will go into the chiller. This chiller is basically a heat exchanger between the refrigerant and the water-based ethylene glycol solution. I'll reject the heat to the chiller and my cycle will continue so that my battery pack is maintained at 25 degrees Celsius. Yes. And the other system is I also need my cabin to be cool. So you can see the evaporator. I will blow air. Evaporator is basically heat exchanger for an air conditioner. This is a conventional thing. So I'll put air on the evaporator coil exchanger so that the cold air is going into the cabin. So I'm completing my objective of battery cooling. I am also getting a cabin cooled, and also I am this is the radiator. So this is there is no compressor or the refrigerant systems involved in this component cooling. So all this is in series. First my coolant goes to controller, converter, onboard drive unit like motors, and then it goes to the radiator, and from radiator is situated at the front of the bonnet, just in front of the car, and air cooling it gets rejected. So and it's important, like this coolant and this coolant is different. This is a separate independent coolant, this is a separate independent coolant, and F signifies the fan. So in just when you see the car from the front, you see the radiator, behind that condenser to reject all those heat into the atmosphere. Another thing here is the surrounding air temperature. If so, this is very relatable to our environment here. So what in terms of VCRS system, what they have done is they have used two evaporators, two expansion valves. So first, and they are in parallel. So this gives a control. For example, if I don't need the cabin cooling, but I need the battery cooling, all those controls are here. And in this diagram, I have not shown the valves and the different gates and the different temperature checks, thermometers, and all are integrated in that, so that everything is optimized. Like for example, if I need cabin cooling, then battery cooling, uh, heat exchanger, flow rate, all those things are optimized to get the overall COP of the system as high as possible. So this is for a cooler application. So this is for a hot climate, and in the hot climate, this is off. The heater module is off, and for the cabin cooling, it is off. What happens in the cold climate is we need to heat the battery, we need to keep the battery warm, and we need to keep the cabin warm. So in case of those kind of climates, what we do is we put the compressor off condition. We don't use the VCRS liquid cooling system. What we do is this heater module is on, so and the pump is there. I think the pump I have also not mentioned in this diagram because many other parts it will make too much of things. So there is always a pump for this refrigerant, for the chiller, for the water ethylene glycol mixture to flow. So the pump will take the water will take the heat from the heater. It will turn hot, and then the hot liquid is input into the plate, and then it goes into the chiller. So this is the cycle. Thus my battery cold plate is kept warm in this condition by putting the heater in on condition. And also for cabin cooling, what I do is I turn this heater on, so that when my fan, there is also obviously a fan here that will blow the air into the heater, and that hot air will blow the air into the chiller, and that hot air will be let into the battery pack. So that my battery pack temperature is kept warm. So in this kind of system, our compressor is not working. So you can see, and but the important point in the cold, the this kind of motor controller converters, this doesn't change where we are in hot climate or cold climate. This will always be generating heat, and this needs to be removed. So these two arrows will be same in most of the irrespective of the climate that we are in. So we can see like this whole complex structure right now for Chevy Bolt design. How versatile is it? Because if we even if we are in a very hot climate like New Mexico and all, where they mostly have their sales, this they are using, they are switching to this kind of cooling. And the same in other climates where it is very cold, they just need to change the controls. That's it. So a permanent design is there, and they just change the controls as per the user, and they are able to get both the benefits irrespective of whether they're in hot climate and in cold climate. This is just a Chevy Bolt battery pack architecture. So for Tesla, this is not the same architecture that they follow. What Tesla does is that right now, if I want to just dissect it, there are three independent cooling system in this schematic. In Tesla, there is a single cooling system with branching. For example, the battery pack cooling system goes the heat from, for example, the battery pack cooling system is also in parallel with the motor control system. For this upper control unit and lower control unit are in parallel. The advantage for that Tesla does is that it can be able to utilize the waste heat. For example, if I want to cool the battery, I'm in a very cold region, and if I have to cool the cabin, what I can do is I can take this heat from the controller converter, and I can use it for my in this chiller, so that input air is a hot or a warm air. So that kind of control energy efficiency increases in those kind of system. However, the control strategy is altogether different for that, because uh, utilizing waste heat is not is not, it's not an IC engine where waste heat will be utilized at that particular rate. The waste heat is, so you don't have a control if you don't use a heater. So it just increases your efficiency if you are switching to intermediate heat exchangers like Tesla does. But in case of Chevy Bolt, as we can see, this coolant has no relation with this cooler. The cabin cooling is done through liquid cooling, and all the three independent cooling system are not dependent on each other. They're independent, and they operate as per the user inputs. So this gives us the whole idea of how a electric vehicle energy management system, thermal management system looks like. It from the earlier slide, I just wanted to mention like these two slides, right? So what they have done is they have it's a hybrid version. It has the aspects of this slide, it has the salient aspects of this vapor compression system, and it also has, for example, for the power inverters, this radiator cooling system. So all these three independent liquid cooling systems are usually combined with the different positives, and then they come up with this kind of architectures. So this was about the Chevy Bolt battery pack. So once we got to know about how the architecture of this thermal management is done, we will see how in practical they are doing this kind of things. So this is the Chevy Bolt battery pack. These are the battery modules. I think the cell are already shown. The pouch cells is there inside this battery modules. There are 5 sections, 2 modules in each section, total 10 sections. So now my objective is to cool all those 5 sections through a coolant, water ethylene glycol coolant. So this is the schematic. So from this image we can't see how is the internal cell arranged. So for that I have made this kind of image. The yellow represents the cell. From the top, what you are able to see, this kind of steel like thing is actually an aluminum fin. So this thing you are able to see from top, and it is a C-shaped aluminum film where the lower end of the aluminum film is in contact with the cold plate, and below the cold plate is an insulation pad, and in between the cold plate and this aluminum fin we have a thermal pad. So what is the heat flow direction is that, and the black color signifies the tap, this kind of tap. So what that heat is getting generated in the yellow portion is getting transferred to the aluminum fin. It is coming here, and from here it is going to the cold plate out of the battery pack. The important thing here is the again the thermal pad. So what if we don't use a thermal pad, we can't ensure whether all this aluminum fin is in contact with the cold plate. There will be small air gaps because of manufacturability, because of the placement issues and all. And even if there is say zero point 0.1 zero point 2 mm of air gap, if it remains, then that has significant impact on your heat absorbing capability. So what we do is we thermal pad is just like a paste. It is like mostly a tooth, you can assume it like a toothpaste kind of thing. So it's very sticky. So once you have this kind of thermal pads or thermal gels in between, your passage of heat is completed, so that there is no air gaps left. And similarly, we don't want the cold plate, as we know, cold plate will have two sides. On one side you have the cells, other side we don't want it to take heat from chassis and all. So what we do is we insulate it. We have an insulation pad below the cold plate, such that the what all heat leverage that I have to take, what all the heat that I have to absorb from the battery is getting from the upward direction, and no heat is coming into the cold plate from the downward chassis because of this insulation pad. Apart from insulation pad, there is it also gives benefit of the cushioning effect, which is very much needed. So yeah, so just I was talking, this is the insulation pad, the black color one. The black color is the chassis, a mild steel chassis of 65 kg. So what we want, the cold plate should not cool this chassis. We don't actually care about whether this chassis is getting that much heated, or because we are concerned about the batteries. So we put the foam here, insulation pad here, and as earlier I stated, right, for conductive heat flux. So this insulation pad also serves that purpose, like my conductive heat flux into the battery is minimized. So once I place this insulation pad in the chassis, I put the thermal pad. So you can see this one is the cold plate, and the white color thing is a thermal pad. Thermal pad is exactly like a clay like thing. So uh, it has to be dealt with proper care. That's why you can see a polyethylene film on them, because if someone touches it, again, thermal pad, if you just touch it or if you handle it improperly, there will be pores, it will be getting wrinkled, there will be bubbles trapped in the thermal pad, and we don't want it. So this part is also very important of getting the placement of the thermal pad on the cold plate as shown here. So apart from this, yeah, so now our this thing is ready. We have put the insulation, we have put the cold plate, and on the cold plate there is a polyethylene protection film. We remove this film before placing the battery pack. because we don't need this film. It will act as a resistance in our path. This is just for a curative measure to take care of the thermal pack. So we remove the polyethylene film, we put the cells onto this thermal pad. So now the assembly is completed. So this assembly is denotes this part. So this assembly, once it is put, it looks like this. So right now, the orange colors are actually the bus bars, positive, negative terminal. So this is our battery pack. So this battery pack, what all we discussed, is able to represent only this part of our circuit. Where is it? Yeah. See, where I'm moving the mouse, only this, the cold plate and battery pack arrangement, I demonstrated it through actual photos. So likewise, if you see the tear down of a car, the disintegration of a car, you will find all these other components inside the placed very optimizedly inside the electric vehicle. So we were here. So this was about the Chevy Bolt battery pack. After this Chevy Bolt battery pack, the most frequently interested is the Tesla battery pack. So you can see like now the cells have changed. They are using a cylindrical cells. That's why the heat exchanger is a wavy serpentile coil. Inside the serpentile coil, we are passing the water ethylene glycol mixture. So we can see like this kind of heat exchanger is complex as compared to the just making this plate. So there are some additional cost uh, drawbacks associated with the heat exchanger design. But again, Tesla has offshooted those kind of additional costs with the mass manufacturing capabilities. So everything is like of a trade-off whether to make this or make that. So we can see about this coils. The heat exchanger is in contact with each cell, but the most disadvantage is that the uh, only 15 degree to 25 degree 15 degree to 20 degree of cell, this area is in contact with the serpentile coil. So because it's a cylindrical structure, and making this kind of extrusions is also expensive. On another thing aspect involved in thermal management design is this thing. Tesla passes cold coil while all these kind of channels are in series. So once my fluid is coming back forth like a snake, and here it will be hot. So what will happen is like cells that are situated here will be slightly warmer than the cells situated here. We don't want that, because in intercell temperature distribution will result into cell imbalances. So the degradation of the cells won't be equal in that case. So this problem mostly is taken care about by the control strategy of Tesla vehicles, because they make the mass flow rate such that the temperature variation between the two extreme cell is less than 2 degrees Celsius. This is ensured by their control strategy. Also, they have connected this heat exchangers in parallel types in the latest model, so that this temperature distribution is minimized. And you can see this is a fully ready Tesla battery pack. There are total 4,500 cells here in case of Model 3, and each of the hottest cell and the coldest cell, the temperature difference is ensured to be within 2 to 5 degrees Celsius. The temperature difference, not the temperature value, but temperature difference, temperature non-uniformity is advisable to be kept under 5 degrees Celsius. Below 2 degrees Celsius is even better. So right now what we got to know is we basically what are the components that were involved here in this kind of thermal management system we got to know. Apart from that, there are many other factors. For example, say for example, the fan. In the schematic there was no fan. Yeah, the fan is here, the fan is also here. So how the fan control will be there, at what time should the compressor be turned off? So all these kind of things are included in the control strategy of the vehicles. Control strategy is like each and every case scenario and what is the possible solution for that. And most frequent question that comes in our mind is say our normal heat generation, because if I am making a vehicle, I know the average heat generation value in that vehicle will be say 2000 watts. That's the heat load is 2000 watts. But at high load condition, while gradient climb or if it's heavily loaded, the maximum will be say 6000 watts. So the question here is, should I select my compressor, condenser, or should I do my component selection and sizing such that as per 6000 watts, or should I do it as per the average heat load? So the what procedure we follow here is that we select a value that is mostly overlapping with our operational zone, say that is 2000 watts. But we do ensure like that point, for example, so 7 to 10 seconds in which the heat load will be say 6000 watt is included in our uh, design. So when the heat load for 10 seconds becomes say 6000 watts, I can control my compressor to have higher rpm for those 10 seconds, such that that 6000 watt design point is included within my thermal management system. So the design of the compressor, the variation of the compressor with respect to load, the variation of the rpm of the compressor with respect to load, makes sure like all the extreme case, worst case scenarios are included within this design. And in case, say for example, unfortunately something, your vehicle is extremely highly loaded also, you're having a gradient climb, you're climbing up very steep, and the heat load uh, goes up to 8000 watts, 7000 watts, way beyond our limit, then my control strategy through the BMS is also that much sophisticated, such that it tells the BMS that your heat load has exceeded the upper limit and your current should be controlled, so that the further heat generation is prevented. So what will happen is that if I'm driving a very heavy vehicle with heavy load on a gradient climb, and if my battery is getting too much heat generation, what the BMS will do based on the inputs from the thermal management system is that it will restrict the upper current value. It won't allow the upper current value to go more than 200 amps. So I won't be getting that much of acceleration. That will be one disadvantage for me. But at the same time, the extreme worst case that may have arise, some fire or thermal runaway is prevented in that case. So it's a lot of such communications, lot of such strategies we need to develop that are already actually developed. For like right now, I know that there are total 53 kind of cases that we entertain just to designing a controller of this compressor. When to turn it off, when to turn it off, how to increase the speed, when to increase the speed. Even if the car is stationary, you have parked it, this compressor starts to work if the temperature goes below sub-zero degrees Celsius. So all those kind of control strategies are embedded inside the controller of this compressor. So keeping that in mind, I'll just like to conclude here with after knowing all this kind of thing, like this is a highly complex thermal circuit, right? And all those experiments that we had to do, all the sizing simulation, is it worth it? Like that is the most obvious question that we have. Is doing all this worth it? So based on that, we have three parameters. What all I have done, what all thermal management I have done in this battery pack, has it able to increase my battery life extended as per my expectation? Has it like for 1,000 cycles were there without thermal management system? With all of this kind of technology, am I able to get 1200 or 1500 cycles? My target cycle, has it able to be achieved? If the answer to this is yes, then has my performance characteristics improved? Performance characteristics not only includes your pickup, your acceleration, which will obviously improve with a thermal management system, but also your cabin experience, like is the air has a proper psychometric parameters, the relative humidity, the temperature, the flow rate, the coolant flow rate, all those kind of thing, has my customer experience improved? So if the answer to this is yes, and the most important thing is the has my competitive advantage enhanced, because as we all know, like battery pack is accounting for 30 to 40% of the vehicle. And if you see any electric vehicle right now in the market, in the salient features list, they do advertise this particular point about the thermal management system of their car, whether it is liquid cool, what kind of advanced heat exchangers they are using. So mostly it creates a perception in the minds like, okay, for example, Tesla, okay, this has a liquid cooling system. BMW i3 has a has a direct refrigeration system. So it creates a competitive advantage for these OEMs that helps to increase the brand value. So considering all these parameters, I personally think most of the OEMs are able to justify the entire development and all the costs that are associated in integrating it into the vehicle. So that was like my complete webinar regarding this. So any further questions if you have regarding the thermal management systems or the overall related to battery packs and all, I will look forward for it now. Hello, hello, ma'am. Hello.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, if anyone
Can we
has any
start our
questions.
Can we start our question session?
Yes, ma'am, sure.
Karkodli madam. Karkodli madam.
Ma'am, 1 second, ma'am.
Vinita Karkodli, questions better read more.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Sir Siddesh, sir. It's very useful session for us. Really, we have thought about only battery only. Now, how the efficiency is decreasing because of this thermal management we have learned here. So, some of the participants have sent some of the question for this question answer session. I just read it, sir. In between,
Sure.
in your presentation, one Mr. Bala Durekanan has asked, what is cycle life? In the pyramid, you have put a cycle lives. No, sir. He is asking, what is cycle life?
Okay, ma'am. So the cycle life is the operational life of the cell. If I want to buy a lithium ion cell right now, I'll go to the manufacturer. He will tell me, okay, this cell is there and it will give me 2000 cycles. One cycle means that if I completely discharge the cell and then I completely charge the cell, this is equivalent to one cycle. So when I say 1000 cycle life, that means 1000 times I can discharge the cell and 1000 times I can charge the cell. But most of the us are not able to relate it with cycle life. So what the OEMs do is they convert this cycle life into your usable total number of years and total number of kilometers that EV drives. So for example, Tesla doesn't say like its cell has 2000 or 3000 cycle life. They tell us that your cycle total number of years is 8 years and total number of drivable kilometers is 2 lakh kilometers. So that is pretty much the cycle life. Just one charge and one discharge cycle is one cycle life.
Thank you, sir. Another question by Mr. Ganesan. If we continuously charge the battery and using it, will the life of the battery reduce? What will be the percentage for maximum charge and minimum charge?
No, actually, once when sir told us the battery pack is getting charged while using it, so I interpret it like while I'm driving, the battery pack is getting charged. So normally this is possible only when the regeneration is there. So what regeneration, right? Yeah,
Hello,
yes,
so you
ma'am.
can continue.
Yeah. So if we continue, yeah, the question is if we continuously charge the battery using it and
Yes.
using it, is life reduces. So yes, of
Yes.
course, even even if we are doing a regeneration may seem very attractive because we are getting the energy back, but at the same time your battery is getting an additional impulse, like it's fluctuating. Say at 10th second it is discharging, at 11th second regen, again 10 second discharging. So this affects your battery life, it reduces it, but not that significantly. And the second question was, what will be the percentage of maximum charge and minimum charge?
Minimum.
So maximum, yeah, maximum charge uh, is different for company, like it depends on the charger basically. AC001, DC001. So as per now, as per to this day, maximum charging is done up to 160 175 kilowatt per Tesla supercharger. Minimum charging is 6.6 kilowatt that we do, like in India, like home charging, 3.3 with the wall socket, 6.6
Thank you,
kilowatt.
sir. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir. Another question. Why don't we use forced cooling system in large battery packs? Why don't we use
So by
forced cooling system?
yeah, so
Yes, sir.
forced cooling system, I am looking it as a forced liquid cooling system. So yes, they actually use it. For example, large battery packs in case of buses, we have those in Pune, we have those BYD buses, K11, K9. In that, the battery pack is 350 kilowatt hour, huge battery pack is there. So for that, they use a forced liquid cooling system. So it's actually for bus applications they do use. And in fact, this Tesla and Chevy Bolt that we discussed, it is a forced cooling, liquid cooling system, because there is uses of pumps and compressors in that. So it's pretty much interesting.
Thank you, sir. The another question by Mr. Sarath Gokul.
Yeah.
Other than four-wheelers, can we use the
Yeah.
batteries for airplanes and ships?
First for airplanes,
Yes, sir.
yes, like people there is a Lilium, a company called as Lilium in Germany that are making electric airplanes. And ships, I personally don't have any idea whether they are using it in the naval ships. uh, Mostly for airplanes, the thing is right now it's not able to justify, because this entire uh, thing is regarding pollution. Most of them try to market it, and for electric plane, pollution is not that much of a concern right now. So for planes, there are very few companies making electric planes. Electric naval ships are, I have no like information on this.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Another question. How much heat must be removed from the battery pack?
So like if it's a four-wheeler, mostly, like I'm assuming he's asking for four-wheeler. Four-wheeler, how much heat is removed from the battery pack? So at the highest condition, like the highest load on the battery is around 6,000 kilowatts. That's the highest load if you're using a mid-segment car. So this is not only the battery pack heat load, it also includes your cabin and other things. So that's what no company will like tell you about the heat load. They will always tell you about the cumulative heat load. The battery heat load will be just a part of that. So it will be around 40 to 50% of those cumulative heat load.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your in detailed explanation for every question, sir. Now I call our professor, ma'am, Dr. Usharani, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. My sincere thanks to you for accepting our invitation and deliver the recent research topic, especially those who are doing research in that particular area of electric vehicles, thermal management system for lithium-ion battery. You have delivered very nicely and very informative sessions. Those they will be utilizing the topics covered by you in their work. Thank you very much, Siddesh sir. Once again, I thank
Yeah, thank you.
all the resource persons, Akilan and Siddesh. Uh, Karpoli madam, whether HOD
Yes,
ma'am
sir.
there?
Yes, ma'am.
HOD
Is there,
ma'am,
ma'am?
no?
Yes,
Ma'am
HOD
is
ma'am?
there,
sir.
ma'am.
Okay. I invite HOD ma'am to deliver the vote of thanks for the end of the session of our program. Ma'am? HOD ma'am?
Ma'am, Tamilchelvi ma'am.
Vinita ma'am, you can unmute one person, no?
Yes, ma'am.
HOD ma'am?
Ma'am?
Only kindly inquire ma'am whether HOD ma'am is there.
Ma'am, she
Yes,
is there
ma'am,
in
she is
line
there.
actually.
She is there.
You have to give
she's-
connection. You have to give
Ma'am, already I given unmute, ma'am.
But again, still it is in.
where is HOD ma'am? Ma?
She is
Can I
here,
call
ma'am.
her?
But yes, ma'am.
Can I call her?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please go.
You call her, Karkoli. Call
Yes,
Karkoli.
ma'am.
I'll tell vote of thanks for a few minutes. Let her ma'am come and join and sir, especially I thank the resource persons, Mr. Akilan. Yesterday he took the topic for battery management system for lithium ion battery. We have received very good feedback, sir. Participants have given very good comment, a good presentation, very informative. Like this, how to conduct more sessions like that. We are happy to heard your lectures. Thank you very much, sir. Today's session, Mr. Siddesh delivered the lecture for thermal management system for lithium-ion battery. This is again the innovative recent research topic. Both the topics of recent research topics. Those who are doing research that can utilize the topics covered for both the sessions. My sincere thanks to our chairman sir, our vice chairman sir, principal sir, HOD ma'am and faculty members, especially Vinita madam, Karkoli madam, who have helped us in making these 2 days workshop event a grand success. I once again thank all our faculty members. I thank all the participants, that is the faculty members who have come from throughout the nation, especially covering all the states and other country, Ethiopia, one faculty member came, Durai sir. Really happy for seeing throughout the nation we have conducted, even we can say international, one faculty member have attended that. I hope these 2 days workshop, PMS for EVs, that is battery management system for lithium ion battery and the thermal management system for lithium ion battery for the 2 days are the hard core topics, would have given you a substantial input about the PMS for EVs. So you have enhanced your knowledge in the particular areas. So I request the faculty members to disseminate the learning among your students. Challenges and opportunities demand high insight into it. I once again thank all. I request our HOD madam for delivering the vote of thanks. Kindly ma'am, kindly join. Vinita madam,
Ma'am, she is there, ma'am. She is there.
where is HOD ma'am?
Ma'am, she's joined only, ma'am.
HOD ma'am?
Ma'am?
Yes ma'am. Vinita?
Yes, ma'am.
Where is
Yes,
HOD
ma'am, she's
ma'am?
speaking.
Hello?
Ma'am is unmuted only, ma'am.
Better, you can invite her to talk ma'am. மேம் vote of thanks உள்ள ஜாயின் பண்ணுங்க மேடம். அப்படிங்களா? இல்ல உங்களோட வீடியோ பார்த்துட்டேன். இப்ப ரொம்ப நேரமா சர்ச்சிங்ல போட்டு உங்களோட ஃபேஸ் வருது.
ஆடியோ வர மாட்டேங்குது. இப்ப டைம் ஆயிடுச்சு. நானும் என்ன செக் பண்ணாலும் நெட் கனெக்ஷன் எதுவும் ப்ராப்ளம் போல
நான் லைன்ல இருக்கேன் மேடம். ஐ ஹோல்ட் தி லைன்.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Hello, can you able to hear?
Hello, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hello,
ma'am.
yes. I'm Tamil Selvi, and yesterday I welcome you all for this 2 days workshop. I hope that you have gained the knowledge about this battery management, and you had a very interactive session in this 2 days workshop. And I hope that you will be having a very good idea about the battery management, not only related to the projects, but also related to the research. I also have a great pleasure to thank our session speaker, Mr. Siddesh, who have accepted our invitation, and he has presented a very nice session today, and he has clarified the doubts also for the participants. And I hope that the participants have enjoyed this 2 day session. And again and again, we are repeating, we are in the lockdown period, so always maintain the social distancing and take care of your health. And thank you for all the participants. Without you, we cannot conduct this workshop in a successful manner. And I also like to thank our organizers, Dr. P. Usharani, Karbulani, and JC Vinita. And also thank you for all the participants. And I hope that in the future also, whatever the programs we are conducting, you have to give the cooperation like this. Thank you once again. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam. All the participants have posted the feedback, ma'am. Kindly verify, pa.
Yes, ma'am.
Karkoli and Vinita, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Somebody has muted, pa. They want to speak.
Then
Karkoli.
Yes, ma'am.
Shall we wind up the session, ma'am? Ma'am? Usharani, ma'am?
Hello.
Hello,
Hello?
ma'am?
Karkoli. Vinita,
Yes, ma'am.
can we?
Wind up the session,
Okay,
ma'am.
ma. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you all. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Siddesh sir.
Good day, sir.